Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, Patrick Donoghue here, news editor with the Irish Farmers Journal. As we approach the autumn, the floods which devastated rural Ireland last winter are still fresh in the minds of many farmers. On Tuesday this week, the IFA organised a protest outside the civic offices in Athlone to coincide with the OPW public consultation on the Shannon Catchment Flood Assessment and Management Plan. That's CFRAM to you and me. Our reporter, Kate Donoghue, spoke to the IFA President Joe Healy about why the organisation was protesting, and she also spoke to a number of farmers about their personal experiences with the floods.
Well, first of all, on the CFRAM report, we feel that there's nothing in it for farmers or rural dwellers or indeed rural areas. As a report, it covers the areas in relation to towns and villages, but when you move out the country, there's nothing there and it has been totally ignored. And that's the constituency that the IFA represents, and that's why we're here today, and that's why we've had a meeting before this protest. So it's imperative that farmers don't suffer this year what they've suffered on numerous occasions over the last 5 or 6, 7 years. In 2009 we were all told that it was a once in a 100 year happening, and we saw last year what happened. And like we saw floods, I've just been speaking to people there from around this area, and they say that at the moment the water levels are way higher in their areas than they were this time last year, and still they were flooded out of it last year. So I think a bit of common sense and a bit of action, and that's what any people, I'm sure you've spoken to them today, what they want to see now is action, and no more reports or no more surveys. There's rooms filled with millions of euros worth of surveys. What they want to see now is action, because we had a meeting, the IFA organised a meeting between Athlone and Ballinasloe last Thursday night. Listen to the people sitting around that room talking from the heart, because they had been through it. They had seen their houses flooded. They had to move their families out of their family home. They had to move their animals out of the sheds and try and move back in again. And to live with the fear of having to do the same thing again this year, it's no surprise that there's such anger there, because they're not seeing anything being done. And I think, in fairness to Minister Kenny and Boxer Moran, they have the best interests at heart. So we want to ensure that any support that they need, that they get, and that various agencies wouldn't be allowed to put flowers and fauna before people and properties.
The CFRAM report has come out, and I suppose it has said about putting up flood defences in Athlone and other towns, but I think it has forgotten about the farmer community downriver, and I think it's important that we have to have maintenance of the River Shannon. I think that's vital at this stage. We have so much talk on, I suppose, it said at one stage that the flood was 1 in 100 years. Now we're after having 2 in a few years, and there has been no maintenance done, and we have all politicians out and talked. So I think it's time for the talking to be over as far as farmers are concerned, and see a bit of action. And as far as I'm concerned, the action is needed is to get in diggers on the River Shannon and take out the pinch points. That's all we're asking. We're not asking to drain the Shannon, just to maintain it.
Acres of land is flooded. It was flooded. It's nearly dried up now, but it's useless. It's not worthwhile reseeding it, because the flood may come again. And we were locked in for, I suppose, 8 or 9 weeks. We couldn't get out from the house without coming out on a tractor. All our area was locked in. We feel there's nothing been done. There's no action being taken. There's a lot of meetings, all right, a lot of talk, but there's no action. Simple as that. So we would like to see them dredging the Shannon and doing the drainage system from where we are down to the Shannon to get the thing sorted out.
Nolan, Mayor of Athlone and dairy farmer. My thoughts on what's happening today is that they're presenting a number of plans in relation to different flood defences that they can do around the area of Athlone. Now, that's welcome in one sense, but really, to be honest, there's no proposed solution. And a bugbear of mine is no proposed solution for the rural areas. And we know from the experience of the last flood, where we did defend the town of Athlone successfully, it did result in a higher flood in the rural areas because there was displacement of water from Athlone out. And my view is, and it always has been, that a targeted dredging programme, not a complete dredging of the Shannon, but a targeted dredging programme is really one solution that should be seriously looked at first. If it solves the problem for the rural areas, it will by default do the same thing for the urban areas. And if you lower the level overall, it solves the problem for everybody. The disappointing point I had about the last CFRAM's public consultation was that when they looked at the different options for different proposed solutions, one of those proposed solutions involved a dredging programme. The cost that was put down to that was about 100 million. That sounds a lot of money, but I know from my experience on the council here that in the last flooding event we spent nearly 5 million. We spent 3 million repairing roads, and we spent 1.4 million in actual direct costs of running pumps and sandbags, etc. during the event. So that's just for the Westmeath side of the town of Athlone. Now, if we add up all those different costs that the different local authorities had down the Shannon, you'll be very quickly get 100 million. The most disappointing line I seen in it was that on the environmental side, they said that it was not viable. Now, on that point, most of the blockages that's in the Shannon, it's widely accepted that the silt is from human activity and is man-made. For the sake of a phrase, it's man-made. So how could interfering to take those back, to put the Shannon back to its natural state, be environmentally unviable? I don't buy that one bit. I think all we're lacking is a little bit of political will to go and do what we all know needs to be done.
I'm the chairman of the Shannon System Flood Alliance, and ourselves and the IFA, we decided to protest today because we're not happy about what's been done about flooding. Absolutely nothing. And the CFRAM report, it seems to be all about the urban area. There's nothing about the rural, nothing to help the rural area. We just can't accept that. Not just farmers, but people living along by the Shannon. There's businesses along there, including myself. I'm in business along by the Shannon. And our businesses are being jeopardised. There's hard-working, decent people been living there all of their lives. And the flooding has taken over, and nobody to do anything about it.
Well, essentially the flooding has been an issue for donkey's years. In Longford, there is huge issues with flooding on farmland. You have not only the Shannon, but all the tributaries that run into the Shannon, particularly the Camlin and the Rinn. The CFRAM's report is a bit of an absolute disaster. Farmers have been considered to have no worth in it. Rural dwellers have been considered to have no worth in it. Because of that, it's been easy for Waterways Ireland to have a veto on the levels, which would prevent summer flooding. So we absolutely need for farmers to be included, not to be told that farmers should be included in 6 years' time. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of farmers and rural dwellers who will be flooded just as bad if everything is done in this report, because they have decided to do nothing with the main body of the Shannon. We cannot countenance that at all. So we have to stand up and we have to say it's wrong. We have to say the criteria the OPW laid down is wrong. We have to say that people are more important than the birds that live on islands that have built up with silt, and that people's livelihoods are important, equally as important, if not more important, than the navigation. It's very disappointing that all of the details that have been brought out by Jacobs in the CFRAM's report, to say that dropping the levels of Lough Ree reduces summer flooding, to say that cleaning the river, not only is it feasible and practical, and that it reduces summer and winter flooding, that all of them have been vetoed by Waterways Ireland and National Parks and Wildlife, and that we are not included and we are considered worthless within it.
Basically, there's nothing in it for farmers or rural dwellers. They haven't taken into account farmers, what's happened to them out on the ground. The flooding, has not receded in certain areas. There's a potential for more flooding, and there are too many bodies involved in it. What we would be hoping that we'd have one body to control the Shannon. We could work with them a lot better.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Staying with the bad weather, heavy rain and heavy ground is leading to heavy hearts for farmers in the northwest. Northern Ireland news correspondent Peter McCann spoke to Charlie breeder and sheep farmer Anthony McColgan about the toll the weather's taking on his farm.
We have about 125 acres between rough and smooth, and we would be renting about another 30 acres. Land type, most of it would be very heavy, some of it peaty. 1 or 2 parcels that would be reasonably good clay land. Over the last 5 or 6 years, we probably only had one decent summer. Last year was a tight summer too. The only thing saved us last year was we had a very good October, and that allowed us to keep the kettle out for an extra month, which we normally wouldn't have got. But this year, I think, is a worse year. We would have plenty of silage because we had a bit left over from last year. We got a good lot of silage last year, and then we had very good growth and for the first 2 weeks in June, and we were able to take out 6 acres out of the grazing and round bale them. So we at the minute now would have plenty of silage for the winter, but the quality of some of it won't be good because we usually just take the one cut, and we only got 2/3 of it when we went to cut it first at the beginning of July. The ground was that wet we had to stop, and it was 3 weeks later then before we got back to cut the rest of it, and that the quality won't be good on that. And even at that, we were still just tearing the ground and destroying the ground. We have had no after grass off that ground worth talking about since. The grazing ground stood up not so bad, but the ground that was cut had never dried out, and we've got no slurry out since that. We've got a lot of slurry out in the spring, but still have a lot of slurry to go out. We've got no slurry out since that. It was 3 weeks after the first of the silage was cut before we got a bit of fertiliser on it. The last piece that we cut there, that was 3 weeks late, we haven't been fit to get into it yet. We had a very black land. We haven't been able to get through it with slurry or fertiliser. So that's cut now a month and there's still no after grass. Still, even at the minute, there's still fields there at the minute sitting that should have been cut a month or more ago. The grass has hardened and went down, and now there's another growth coming up through it. You still see that. A lot of silage was gathered up on Monday and Tuesday of last week. Monday was a dry day, but it was cloudy. Tuesday was a very good day. There was clear skies. I would say it was 2 months before that we had a day that you could see a blue sky. It's always been cloudy, like even if it wasn't raining, it's overcast, and so there was no growth or drift. But that's last Monday and Tuesday of last week. Now there was a lot of silage gathered up. A lot of boys that were in second cut, and even a lot of first cut that was lying about. Tuesday was a very busy day for contractors because the forecast was for rain for Wednesday, and the rain didn't come on Wednesday.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Our reporter Anthony Jordan was at the Virginia show on Wednesday when he caught up with the EU Commissioner for Agriculture, Phil Hogan. Anthony began by asking the Commissioner about the €500 million aid package for farmers.
On the €150 million aid package that's going out for supply control measures, do you expect many member states to take up this offer?
There is a huge interest in this particular scheme we're trying to bring about balance between demand and supply in the milk market. If the milk market does not achieve balance, we won't have a higher price for the farmer. And this is my first and foremost prerequisite, is to help the farmer. So this is a novel scheme, a new scheme. It never was tested before in the European community, and I expect it will be a major success. And already we see the signs of prices beginning to increase, not just because of the scheme, but also of the increased prices for commodities in the spot market.
Is there any indication of kind of how much farmers will have to cut supply by if they enter the scheme? For example, would it be 2 to 3%, or would it be as high as 5 to 6%?
Well, they have an opportunity in the 3 months of where the scheme will operate in October, November, December to trigger their interest or not. But there will be conditions attached whereby
do you know when the conditions are in?
If they indicate that they want to participate, that if they don't participate,
will you know when they'll be in?
Tomorrow. The details will be announced tomorrow. Sure, the Farmers Journal will first visit.
On the 350 million, is there kind of been any kind of interesting proposals from other member states in terms of cheaper loans?
No, they have no member state has indicated their interest yet, because they have until the 1st of November if they wish to take that long to draw up their own programme. So we've tailored it to give the maximum flexibility to the farmers in each member state to reflect their individual conditions in those member states. So Ireland has got €11 million under that scheme. Minister Creed is going to add to that, and at the end of the day he'll make the decisions in consultation with the stakeholders about how we're going to spend that money, but it's principally for the dairy sector.
Finally, on the Russian ban, obviously, have you any confidence that will end anytime soon?
No.
Or are you going to pursue any?
We've done everything we can in the European community, including President Juncker meeting President Putin in recent weeks. It's up to President Putin. He doesn't seem to be for changing his mind at the moment. In fact, he's announced an extension of it until the end of 2017. So I wish we could normalise trade relationships with Russia, but of course there are political issues above my pay grade which come into play.
You're pursuing legal proceedings at the moment, is that correct?
Yeah, well, we have a WTO panel which has resulted, the result of that will be known in the coming days. We are very confident of winning that particular case in relation to an issue about disease and pig meat markets in the European Union, and allowing those particular products to be able to be exported to the Russian people without having fear or favour in relation to disease.
Thank you very much.
The Irish Farmers Journal weekly podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
On Monday, Crime Stoppers, the IFA and Gardaí launched a new campaign to combat the problem of farm-related crime and thefts. Garda detective Eugene O'Sullivan told reporters at the launch how his force goes about tracking down stolen machinery.
We noticed an increase probably at the start of the Celtic Tiger, where certainly there was a big increase in the number of tractors and larger machinery and other vehicles that we used around the farm, and also by construction companies, which weren't as much valued in because they didn't have a whole lot to do. So we noticed an increase in the thefts of those, and gradually that has dropped since, dropped by over 100%. I know, for example, because I've dealt with it personally, that the theft of tractors last year was 49 for the 26 counties, and we had 39 of those recovered, which is nearly 70%. Larger vehicles, like say more expensive tractors, low loaders, more expensive machinery is certainly going abroad. Now a lot of this stuff is identified, can be identified uniquely because they're going to have diagnostic systems on them, which a main dealer is only going to be able to work on and service in that.
Is that continental Europe?
Yes, continental Europe, Northern Ireland. We've had stuff stolen here, equipment stolen here that has ended up as far away as Australia.
What happens to a farmer if he buys by mistake, say, a tractor that's been stolen, or if you bought a piece of machinery that later turns out to be stolen? What should you do?
A lot of stolen vehicles are discovered like that. If somebody buys maybe a foreign registered tractor or a tractor that isn't registered, I've just used tractor as an example, it can be any piece of equipment, and they go to register it or they go to service it, and subsequently it might be flagged with the manufacturer that it's stolen, or it might be flagged with the Department of Transport that it could be stolen. They subsequently discover then that it's stolen, so we're then contacted. We would go out and examine the vehicle, identify it. You'll usually find that it's genuine and that the serial numbers and chassis numbers and identification numbers haven't been interfered with at all, or else that they have been done and changed professionally, and that the vehicle is in actual fact being cloned. Once we identify it, then we're obliged to seize the vehicle, investigate the case, and if we're satisfied then that the person is a genuine purchaser and a victim themselves, there's no prosecution in that regard. I suppose we'd endeavour to investigate who he purchased the vehicle from and bring it to court if we can.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Last week, FarmersJournal.ie broke the news that Larry Goodman's ABP Group has decided to initiate an opt-in rather than opt-out system for the levy collection from farmers. In order to gauge the mood of the country following the news, Odile Evans spoke to David Quinn, who's the mart manager in Carnew, while Kieran Lenihan spoke to beef farmers Fintan Maher, John Dunn and Ken Gill.
It's a bit of a surprise, I suppose, and from the IFA's point of view, I suppose it's a bit of a blow to them, because I suppose they're one of the largest beef processors dropping the levies with a huge throughput of cattle and whatever. So look, I suppose going back to last December or November when the trouble came, I suppose I felt that IFA would have to look at maybe the whole system, and I think this probably is going to concentrate the minds again now, and they're really going to have to have a look and see where they go from here, particularly collecting with the factories. The marts are a bit different, but the factories, when they're expecting the factories to collect for them and then they're going in the other door to argue and negotiate with them on price, it's hard to know whether it's really the right system anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, following on from that now, what are you going to do? Are you going to go for an opt-in system like ABP, or what's your plan?
Well, we've no plans. Like I suppose I've been interviewed on this subject a good few times over the last year, and I suppose what we said before was that all through 2015 up until the crisis came, there was a fair degree of people dropping their IFA levy. When the crisis came in November, that was exasperated, I suppose, and multiplied by a large fold. Now since the new year, it sort of has levelled off. There's an odd few taking it off, but in general terms it's kind of just holding steady. But again, I suppose where it is now today towards vis-a-vis 2 years ago, I'd say we'll be back a fairly significant percentage, and really and truly I suppose at the moment we have no plans to change anything. But as I said to you earlier, I think the IFA are probably going to have to look at the whole system, and I think they're going to have to be proactive in it now, and maybe just see where they go from here now, rather than expecting individual marks. But at the moment I have no plans to change. As I say, we're on a situation where anyone who opts out, we're not collected. Anyone who doesn't opt out is still being collected, and at the moment I think we'll probably stay that way.
And roughly, like since in November, what sort of percentage of farmers would you say have dropped off?
I would say, again I'm only guessing, I haven't done anything mathematically on it or anything more, but I would say probably 25-30% have dropped off since November, and there probably would have been 10 to 15% had dropped off before that. So I think you could be looking at 30-40%, maybe even up to 50%, but between 30 and 50% I'd say have dropped over the last 2 years.
Yeah, so the levy issue was essentially bubbling for a good while before November happened, really. But I suppose, do you see the need for a strong IFA?
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt there's a need for a strong IFA. I think. Look at particularly this year. It's very prominent with the low prices in the cattle end, the low prices in the dairy, the grain. A strong farm organisation is critical for the country and for farmers and for everyone really in the agri-business. However, I still would say that particularly with the factories, it's no big deal. I think with the marts are not. The marts don't make the price. The marts are only agents in the purchase and sale of livestock, and I haven't an issue with collecting it for whoever wants to pay it. But I think the factories collecting the levies and then the IFA going to negotiate on the prices and the different weight categories and everything else, all the implementation, I think it's questionable, and I think the IFA probably will have to look at other ways of maybe keeping their finance up, and maybe whether they look it up in membership or I don't know. I'm not. The IFA are going to have to. That's their business. But I think in the long term they are going to have to look at something else. Yeah.
And my last question then is: do you see the need for more consistency in how the levies are collected? Is it the same in every mart, or how's it?
Oh, absolutely not, because there's a lot of marts and a lot of the private marts in particular don't collect the levies. So it's hit and miss now, depending on most cooperative marts, as far as I know, do collect them, and maybe half the private marts. So look at how do you make it across the board? I think it's up to each mart organisation to decide whether they want to do it or they don't want to do it. In my view, I have no objection to doing it. I think the IFA provide a great service. I have no problem in collecting money for them. But again, I think it can't be enforced upon the farmers to pay it. I think we would do it at the behest of the farmers. But if, as I say, anyone that comes into the office and wants to sign themselves off, that we will do that straight away. So that's our view on it.
With news coming in that Ireland's biggest beef processor has switched from an opt-out to an opt-in policy regarding IFA levies, I'm talking to Offaly suckler farmer Fintan Maher and looking for his reaction to the whole thing.
I'd be in favour of staying in, as is. I had cases before where factories went against bad grades, and IFA turned them over for me. So I think it's staying in with IFA would probably be a good for the farmer. Good thing for you anyway. Yeah, good thing for me, yeah. So you're going to opt in? I'm going to opt in anyway if we get the choice, yeah. Just that gives you a better power when you have the IFA behind you. Yeah, you need representation. Need representation, got nothing. And a phone call's not good to them. They just pawn you off. At least IFA will get down and do some work for you anyway. Thanks, Fintan. No bother.
Suckler beef farmer John Dunn. A speed wobble for the IFA this week. If more factories and indeed marts and co-ops follow suit with the levy policy, will the Irish farmer opt into levies, and will you opt in, John?
I think a lot of farmers will opt out. They will shy away from paying out this money. However, I think IFA will have to learn from this experience, and they'll have to become a leaner, meaner machine in the future. Committed farmers like myself understand the importance of a strong IFA, but IFA has a very high membership and a lot of passengers in that membership. So I think the committed people will stay with IFA and will drive IFA forward in the years to come.
Thanks, John. I'm here with Midland suckler farmer Ken Gill. Ken, we saw what happened yesterday. There was a bit of turmoil between ABP and the IFA. Ken, do you think if given the choice, suckler farmers will decide to opt in to levies?
I think most farmers understand how much good work the IFA do, and even with the past problems, that they're happy enough to support them. And as long as the opt-in is a relatively easy option, I think the vast majority will still agree with it, because when you see the turnout at annual general meetings and stuff, guys still like to support the IFA.
So you're opting in, Ken?
I will be opting in.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
And you can read our 8-page analysis and investigation into the amount of levies farmers have to pay every year in this week's Farmers Journal and on farmersjournal.ie.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Irish Country Living editor Mairead Lavery was at the Taste Council's annual Food Summer School in Brook Lodge, County Wicklow this week. There she met Taste Council Chairman Kevin Sheridan, who spoke about the importance of supporting artisan food producers.
Kevin, a successful day. What were the highlights for you?
Fantastic day, Mairead, thanks. I think actually looking and listening to the wonderful people from Athlone Island who came all the way up and explained to us what they're doing there on this island. And we had brewers, we had sheep farmers, we had butchers, fish smokers, and just explaining how they were working together on this small island, carving out a food community. And they ended with saying, you know, food was at the heart of Athlone and the heart of their lives. I think it was really a brilliant session.
I think there's more realisation that food is so important, critical to shaping rural Ireland and for the economic success of it. And then that's linked into tourism. The afternoon was gathering a lot of information from the people who are attending today, you know, with a lot of experience, looking at the practical things that we can do. What struck you from that session?
I think there was two main things that came out. It was a really interesting session. I think the need for further and more cooperation at a local level and a national level between the food producers and farmers themselves, getting together, learning from each other and using the huge experience that they already have. So networking and cooperation. And then in a similar way that we need the different groups that from Teagasc to Borbia to the Department of Agriculture to the EHOs to LEOs to leader groups, they need to be working to a national coordinated strategy and need to work together.
So there's a lot happening, but it isn't exactly coordinated.
Yes, exactly. There's a lot out there, but it's difficult sometimes for the food producer to find the support. They're not sure which body to go to. And there's a feeling of wasted resources. You know, resources are important, but if we maybe had a more finite strategy and the signposts were there, who's doing what, but working and playing up the same hymn sheet.
Right, so that there's consistency across the board.
Yeah,
and I mean, some of the practical things that were brought up, the fact that, you know, somebody producing free-range eggs can't sell them directly to a hotel.
There's always this, and that's about national strategy, because if you sit down and you have Teagasc and the EHOs or Food Safety Ireland saying, we want people to produce eggs on a small scale and we want bed and breakfast to be selling local food, then if they're sitting down together and they have a national strategy and there's value to that strategy, then there's going to be action taken to make that happen, because there's no reason why that can't happen. It's just about the right people knowing that there's a value to doing that.
Right, and that's the kind of work that the Taste Council is continuing to do.
Exactly. We're looking at trying to influence people, putting together programmes that'll make all of these happen. And we'll take all the learnings from today, put them together, and that'll form our strategy over the next number of years.
Okay, well listen, thank you very much. Very successful day, great really crowd of people here, and a lot of interaction the whole time.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Thanks.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Will we be allowed to feed a growing population by 2066 using GMOs? This was the question posed by Maurice Maloney, CEO of the Global Institute for Food Security in Canada, at the 18th World Congress of Food Science and Technology, which is taking place in the RDS this week. My colleague Amy Fitzgibbon was at the event, and she spoke to Maurice about the difference in attitudes towards GMOs between North America and Europe.
So Maurice, you gave a very interesting presentation, and there were a couple of statistics that stood out. The first one is that over the next 50 years we will have to grow roughly the same amount of food we've cumulatively been growing since the beginning of time. And the other statistic was that we have to grow roughly 70% more food on the same land area. So that's basically increasing yield. So how important is GM to this growth?
Well, we believe that GM does provide a very significant portion of the solution to these problems. 70% more food is a lot of pressure on the agricultural system, and so we will need technologies that have a substantial not just incremental improvement, but actually a transformational improvement, and GM crops have been demonstrated to do that. Major crops like corn, soybean, canola, papaya, all of which have shown dramatic improvements in yield and quality as a result. But I think there's another question which is less obvious, and that is, if you're really going to push your agricultural system to feed that many more people, there is a risk to sustainability. And in particular, we worry about soil quality. Soil quality, if one pushes an agricultural system too hard, can cause basically a collapse of soil nutrient availability or just the physical structure of the soil. GM, particularly the introduction of herbicide-resistant crops, has demonstrated that because it allows low-till agriculture, so you're not working the soil as much because you're not as worried about the weed populations, it's been able to improve soil moisture, soil organic matter, and the amount of work by tractors basically moving over the soil, burning diesel, all of those things have gone down dramatically. So we do actually believe that GM is offering us solutions not only to that productivity, but mitigating some of the pressure on the system that would cause collapses if we didn't have appropriate sustainability built in.
Okay, and now we're here in Ireland, in Europe, and of course Europe has a very different attitude to GM crops than, say, North America and so the United States and Canada. So what role do you think Europe will play in this growth over the next 50 years if we're not allowed to use GM crops? They're banned in a lot of European countries.
Okay, well, Europe is in a very difficult situation right now. Actually, it's become a net importer of primary agricultural products. Although there's a lot of talk about not using GM, the European Union is actually the largest importer in the world of GM. But
GM feed.
And it's feed, yes, of course, because you could not possibly run the pig and poultry industry in Europe without soybeans right now. So there's a bit of a, let's say, a contradiction there. But I think more importantly, and I've talked to lots of European farmers, European farmers generally would love to be able to get some of the benefits that they've seen in North America and around the world from GM. I'm not saying it would be 100% adoption, but a lot of farmers would certainly like to be able to deal with things. Wheat farmers would love to deal with the blackgrass problem that we have, which is a resistant weed now that really dogs the production of cereals. And I think in broadleaf crops as well, like canola or oilseed rape, it is also vital that we get a handle on how to control the weed populations. Otherwise, it involves chemistry and it involves a lot more tillage of the soil. People don't realize that per ton of grain right now, Europe uses about 1.7 times as much pesticides as does North America. And why has the pesticide use gone down in North America? It's all because of GM.
And in your role as CEO of the Global Institute of Food Security in Canada, do you have many meetings with the EU, and have you seen any can you give us a sense of what their attitude is towards GM crops and how that might change in the future?
Yes, so since I've been over in Canada, to be honest, I've not spent as much time in the commissions. But when I was the director of Rothamsted Research in the UK, I used to go over to Brussels about once a month. At that time, to be honest, I found DG Agriculture and DG Environment far too political and ideological, and not really making policy decisions based on sound science. The EFSA, which is the European Food Safety Authority, has done an awful lot of work and made many recommendations to the commissions, which then got trumped by political considerations. I don't think in the long term that's good for any nation or club of nations, because it actually, to form policy around that's contrary to sound science is only going to get you into longer term trouble. So my view is there is a golden opportunity actually right now in front of the Commission, and that is with genome editing. Genome editing is a very precise way of modifying the genome, and actually it is much, much safer than conventional systems of breeding, which we call mutation breeding, because it provides a single mutation, so it's very precise and predictable. There is an opportunity for the EU to embrace that technology and begin to incorporate that into its farming. If it does that, then it will actually open the possibility, because there's a lot of technology in the universities and institutes that could be incorporated, but they're held back. The scientists are actually held back by these regulatory blockages. So Europe could be very successful in dealing with this 70% deficit of food, provided that some of these technologies can be introduced. If not, it'll be more use of chemicals. It won't be possible to say, well, get rid of chemicals and we'll still hit the 70%. It just won't happen.
Okay, and what would you say to people who would have issues about the safety aspects of GM crops?
To be honest, because of the many, many years of studies that have been done on the safety of GM crops, GM crops and primary materials from GM are the safest food products on the market. Categorically, they have been studied more than any other form of food product, almost to the level of a pharmaceutical. And to be honest, the conventional and organic agriculture really needs to recognise that there are other problems. First of all, the amount of pesticides used in Europe. The thing is, if they are used precisely and accurately the way the manufacturers say, generally they are okay. But the consumer would say, I'd much prefer to use less if we can do something. And every time I've ever presented to a lay audience in Europe, they've always said, if you can do something biological that solves the use of chemicals, we quite like that.
And finally, you asked a question at the end of your presentation, so will we be allowed to feed 9.6 billion people? So what do you think is the answer to that?
Well, first of all, I think scientifically, although it is very difficult, we've got a lot of things going on, climate change, as I talked about, water deficits in places, nutrient utilisation. There's a lot of headwinds, but I think it's doable. Having said that, it's not doable unless all nations in the world recognise we've got a big problem looming and begin to develop policies that are based much more on science than they are on either ideology or political expediency. We don't really have the room for that kind of political expediency anymore. People don't realise that the symptoms of food insecurity are things like migration. All the migration we're seeing, not from Syria, but from North Africa, is to do with food security. That's going to continue unless we figure out ways of resolving those problems. Then we will actually pay for that food insecurity one way or another.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
The Swiss Dairy Farmers Association was in Ireland for a couple of days this week. Irish Farmers Journal market specialist Phil O'Neill met with Stefan Hagenbuch, a member of the association, to discuss the dairy market and the difference between Irish and Swiss costs of production.
Stefan, if I might first welcome you to Ireland. Thanks. And to this gorgeous farm in County Wicklow. I know you're here to find out about the Irish industry. Can I ask you a little bit about the Swiss dairy industry? How is it performing at present and what are your ambitions for the future?
Thank you for the welcome to Ireland. It's very nice and we are very impressed. In Switzerland we are more and less in the same situation because we phased out the milk quota system 2009 and then if you're phasing out the milk quota it's changed everything on the market. You have new rules on the market. You have to decide you want to export more and less. It became a very difficult situation for the farmers too, but I think we have to be competitive on the market, that's the point, and we have to develop our traditional products we have on the market in Switzerland. It's clear it's quite different. We have our big points is the cheese in Switzerland. Yes. Cheese is very important and we will focus more on cheese in Switzerland and to export all over the world our famous cheese we have.
Okay, so you have no quota now?
No, it's no quota. Right. It's no quota.
Your market, you still have a fairly large tax on imports of milk, so your market is still protected?
It depends. We have protection for powder and butter, that's correct, on the world market and to the European countries, but we have no protection on cheese. We have free trade with cheese, importation, exportation from cheese from the European countries. It's open doors for cheese.
And in terms of Swiss farmers, is milk production profitable for them at the moment? What is your current price per litre?
The current price seems high for you, but it's not enough for our farmers. That's
because your production costs are high?
Because the point is very well the production costs. Because today I heard from Joe in his presentation, the labour cost is 26,000 a worker on the farm. In Switzerland, it's triple. And we have a different level of costs. And the farmers live from the difference, not from the price.
Correct, yes.
That's the important point. And so we have, for the farmers, we have quite different conditions, and we have to create and to develop our added value products.
In Ireland, the average, I know average is very dangerous, but the average production cost is thought to be around 26 cent per litre. We are getting around 20 or 22 cent at the moment, so we are losing money. What is the position in Switzerland?
The production cost in Switzerland will be the double than in your country. But the reason are the costs we have in Switzerland, the high costs we have. I don't know in the future, we have other conditions on the market. It's clear the costs will be influenced by the market too. That's important. But at this level, our costs will be
over 50 cent per litre.
Yes, or euro. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, well, euro cent we refer to. I know in terms of the Swiss currency.
We have our own currency.
Correct. And in terms of what price, whether it's in your own currency, can a farmer get per litre at present?
It depends on the valorization, because we have different markets. We have the market with non-silage milk, that's for the natural cheese, and then farmer can get more than 60 euro cents for a litre, more than 60 euro cents. But we have milk for the industrial processing, and it can be the half price. For example, the best price is the Gruyere, for the cheese Gruyere, but for the industrial milk it can be the half price. But there are two different kind of milk.
Yes.
And so we have quite big differences of prices.
Today you spend on this farm in County Wicklow. What is your plans for tomorrow and the remainder of your visit?
Yes, today we have a milk day. That's for our board member is something education. We are here to learn, to see how you are working, how you are doing it, influence your future. That's the milk day today. Tomorrow we have more a touristic day.
Okay, Stephen, enjoy the remainder of your visit to Ireland. I trust it's both informative and a little bit of pleasure thrown in as well. Thank you very much.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Finally, the CAO points were published this week, and there was some good news for those looking to study agricultural science in UCD. Amy Fitzgibbon found out more with our Education and Careers editor, Mary Phelan.
So, Ag Science in UCD, I guess, is a course that a lot of students interested in this area would aim for. And the points for this actually dropped from 470 to 460. The only other time in the last 12 years that there was a drop in this course was 2007, when it went down from 3 to 315, and it has risen basically every year since then, going up to a peak of 470 last year, and that has now dropped. Now, other level 8 ag and ag science programs around the country also saw a drop in points for the most part, so WIT is probably the next most popular place for students to study, and the course there dropped by 15 points to 400. Now, that had actually dropped 15 points as well last year. It had been at 430 in 2014, which was the first year that WIT offered a level 8 honours degree in ag science via direct entry through the CAO. So 430 would be quite high for a course like that in its first year out. So you could maybe say that in WIT the points were maybe levelling out to where they maybe should be, but for UCD certainly it's the first time there's been a decrease in a long time.
Okay, so the drop is, I suppose, good news for students, but why do you think the drop is taking place?
So, I mean, there's a very obvious explanation as such, which people might already have seen reported on, which is that students are pretty much heading towards other areas, namely technology, business and commerce. But what's also receiving a lot of attention is the construction related areas of engineering and architecture, for example. So I guess I'm not saying the boom is back or anything, but the recession is certainly over. There's more confidence in those areas. So students, I guess, are feeling more confident about putting them down on their CAO form. But also, what I think may be another contributing factor, and this is just my opinion, but it's based on writing about careers and education in this area for the last few years, but the number of courses in agriculture and agricultural science and even in related areas, it really has ballooned in the last few years. Really during the recession, I guess there was a lot of attention on the sector. It looked like the one to go for if you wanted to get a job. I mean, that is true. There are a lot of jobs in it, but courses really started cropping up all over the country. And then this year alone, so there already has been a huge amount of extra courses added in recent years, but then even in 2016 alone, IT Carlow at its Wexford campus, it's this year for the first time running both the Level 7 and Level 8 programme in Sustainable Farm Management and Agribusiness. GMIT, which for a long number of years has been running a Level 7 Agriculture and Environmental Management programme and a Level 7 Rural Enterprise and Agribusiness programme, it is now also offering those two courses at Level 8 as well as at Level 7.
Okay, so there's a lot of competition among the courses to get students.
Yeah, there really is. And then IT Sligo as well this year introduced both a Level 7 and a Level 8 Agri-Food Science programme, and LIT is in just its second year offering an environment management course in agriculture. So really CAO points, they're always saying it's about supply and demand, and there is certainly a huge amount of supply in this area at the moment, so I do think that's a big contributing factor.
And what about the points for veterinary? Did they drop also this year?
So veterinary, yes, any would-be veterinary students may have been very pleasantly surprised to see that.
Because those points are extremely high.
They're extremely high. They have been 575 with an asterisk for 2015, 2014 and 2013. The asterisk means that not everybody who even got 575 got a place. It was random allocation. So they dropped to 570 this year. Veterinary nursing then as well. UCD is the only place in the country you can do an honours degree in veterinary nursing. The points for that stayed the same, but for the other institutions around the country where you can study it, such as Dundalk IT, Letterkenny IT and Athlone IT, the points all dropped there for those programmes.
Okay, and finally, what about home ec teaching?
So home ec teaching is an interesting one. St Angela's College in Sligo is the only place where you can study it. The points for home ec teaching with Irish skyrocketed. They went up by 70 points from 375 to 445, whereas home ec with biology went down 5 points, home ec with religion went down 5 points, and then home ec with economics went up 5 points. So for some reason this year there's a huge interest in studying home ec with Irish.
Okay, well that's great, and you can find out more about that in this week's
Country Living. Yes, there'll be something in the main section of the paper as well and on farmersjournal.ie.
Okay, thanks a million, Mary.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.